Okay, welcome back everyone. In this lecture, we are going to focus on Address Resolution Protocol or ARP. So, how ARP works? You know that there in every local network, every device has an IP address and a MAC address. The IP address is usually 32-bit numbers that represents how the device is perceived by other devices. But if you want to communicate in a local network, for example, if you want to communicate with a PC that is connected through the same Wi-Fi or connected through a same local network, then in order to communicate with that machine, what you have to do is you need to know their MAC address, because IP address is only used when you want to communicate with the internet or the network devices that are outside your local network. What if you want to communicate within your network? To do this, you have to know the MAC address of this device. But how do we know the MAC address? To do this, or to get the MAC address of other devices, we use a protocol called ARP. So it provides a mapping between IP addresses and MAC addresses. So what this protocol basically does is that you input an IP address and it returns the MAC address of this device. And then once you have the MAC address, you can use it to communicate or exchange packets with that device. So how in this lecture we are going to focus on how we can discover clients on a similar network or a local network. So let's say we have a PC and then we have a router and then we have other devices, for example your phone, your desktop PC or something else, your iPad, whatever it is. So let's say you want to discover which client it is. So the first idea is to ping the clients, all the clients in the network, and once you ping these devices you get their responses back, and then by analyzing their responses you know what device it is. And then these devices return an IP value which represents the address of this machine. For example, let's say I'm sitting in a room and I say whose name is, let's say, John. Everyone except John will stay quiet, and then John will say, yes, I am John. So basically this is how ARP works. So ARP says who is ABC or who is X, and then the person or whoever it is whose name is X or John or whatever it is, he replies back with an answer and the others stay quiet. So this is how ARP works. Okay, so in this lecture we are going to see a practical or visual representation of how this algorithm works. So first thing, you have a device, let's say this is your device which has an IP address of 192.168.0.13 and this has a MAC address which is this value. And then there is a router in your network or gateway that is used to communicate with external internet. So this address, his address is 192.168.0.1. and most of the time you will find that every router has the same address because it's a convention that is used in a local area network. And then you have three other devices. Now let's say you want to communicate with this address 192.168.0.25 and this is your machine. So how do you communicate? This PC or device communicates with this device. So in order to do this, it sends an ARP request, and there are different types of request, but this type of request will be called who has request. So what this request does is basically it sends out an IP address, and then it sends this IP address to everyone or broadcasts this IP to every device in the network. So this packet goes here, 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 and here. So every device receives the address, and once the request has reached each device, this is called broadcasting basically. So once this has, every device will verify this request with its own IP address. So this will check if the request's IP address is the same IP address as my own machine. Similarly, this router will do the same, and this machine will do the same. Once this has verified, this will return false because 192.168.0.1 is not equal to this value, and similarly this will return false and this will return false, but this will return true because this value is the same value as this one. So as I already said that you shout, for example, whose name is John, and then only John will reply because his name is John. Similarly, this device will now send back a response. This is called ARP response, and then it will say I have a MAC address of this thing with this value. So in response, it will reply his own MAC address, which is 110.A95.90.6824. So in this way, this device has an ARP table. So what the ARP table is basically a list which contains mappings of IP addresses and their MAC addresses. So something like this, for example, device number 1, their IP address, and then their MAC address. Once it gets back a response, it updates its ARP table with, for example, 192.168.0.25, and then it updates the MAC field as this value, and then it tries to communicate with it. So this is how ARP communication or ARP protocol over a network works.